In the 1950s, Artur Berlet, a simple man from the countryside of Rio Grande do Sul who was a tractor driver. He only completed the first year of elementary school and was missing for 8 days. But when he came back, he returned, telling an incredible story of someone who had been taken to another planet. And there one would have seen such impressive things. So many advances in science and technology were hard for people of the time to understand. Artur Berlet revealed information that only with the event of the space race or only now in the sky. 21st century, almost 70 years later. It's when we start to better understand existence, from monocrystalline silicon for solar panel production, the artificial satellite to video calls over the phone. Inventions or discoveries unknown or still under development at that time. He also claimed that the Earth was blue. This was 3 years before the first human, a cosmonaut, traveled into space. And see the same thing. Hello friends! From history, if you haven't already, we have scientific proof of intelligent life beyond Earth, yet many doubt sightings of alien ships. And regarding contacts with extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings, the account of Artur Berlet's supposed abduction is at least intriguing. Told by him in this book in 1958, titled The Flying Saucers. Utopia to Reality, a story of a true journey to another planet. The case is even more impressive considering the context in which he lived and his limited formal education. A resident of Saranda in Rio Grande do Sul, just like many others. Like all the gauchos, Artur Berlet was of German descent and learned the foreign language at home as a child, which would be very useful. As we will see later, the profession of tractor operator was not the only one he practiced, and at the same time he also tried his hand at photography. Itinerant. Back then it was common to travel the countryside, going from house to house, taking those posed family portraits. Especially of the children. Those photos later, see, they were painted, hand retouched on a canvas. Painting. On that day, May 14th, Artur Berlet returned to some rural houses to deliver the ready photos and collect payments, but he missed the bus schedule. On the way back to the city and decided to walk the 11 miles from the town named Natalino, where he was. See you in Sarandi? It was 7 in the evening. It was already dark when Artur Berlet saw a bright light in the brush by the dirt road. Believing in a local legend, he thought it could be a sign that there was gold around. And buried 2 ancient maragatos from the time of the Federalist Revolution, a conflict between Republicans in the south of the country that occurred at the end of the 19th century. Driven by curiosity, the man then jumped over a barbed wire fence and spotted a round and bright object about 30 meters in diameter, and decided to get even closer to understand what it was. That's when 2 flights appeared, and a strong beam of light hit the tractor. That was the last thing he saw before passing out, because she fainted on the spot. When she opened her eyes, she was already inside a spaceship lying down, in an environment he initially compared to a hospital room, then thought he was aboard a ship. There were several people around exactly like human beings, but nobody seemed to pay much attention. In it, only after was he led through some corridors, chambers, small rooms and several doors, all the way outside when he stepped on solid ground in a city completely unknown and different from anything he had seen before. Of tall buildings with... How bright was the space? External walls had light. The streets narrow and crowded with people coming and going, and above them flying vehicles. They carried even more people. Feeling sick and gradually adapting to a different gravity, Berlet described, "I'm late because of my weight, and at the same time my shoulders have gotten bigger." The volume. From there, the tractor driver narrates how he was received by several people gathered who spoke a language strange and seemed to be arguing among themselves. What to do with it? Berlet tried to communicate in Portuguese, but it was only when he switched to German that he found someone to talk to. However, in other cities, where he was taken next. That's how it was. Does he say? Meat was on the planet. About 65 million kilometers away from Earth. It went on to describe then the successive Activities, tours, travels, and visits. Visits he made while he was a guest of the only inhabitant of that world who had learned the German language. The host was a cultured person and important in that society and had government authorization to guide the earthling on that planet. He lived with his family in an apartment where the balcony served as parking for the vehicle, a type of private flying car. Powered by solar energy, by the way, like everything in Acarte where the main source of energy was. The sun, as we can see in this dialogue from the book, started with a question from Berlet. How is the engine of this device moved? Turning to me, the extraterrestrial replied, with solar energy. Solar energy, but what kind of driving force is this? And then it was the Akarchan who asked, but do they not yet know the Earth? And Berlet replied, Anti-Chip-Topi. Well, I've never heard of it. Maybe there's someone who knows about it since lately our scientists have discovered a lot. But for most of us Earthlings, the discoveries remain mysteries. But despite being unknown to the tractor driver, the invention of the first selenium photovoltaic cell capable of conducting electricity when exposed to solar light was from the North American inventor Charles Fritz. In 1800, several decades later, a more photoconductive material, a robust one, was identified, and the solar cells as we know them today are made of silicon. As for the planet's water, Aneta Carte seemed strange to Arthur Berlet. Very light as a gas. He would drink almost a liter to quench his thirst. Didn't seem to truly wet. The earthling also thought he found the clothes they gave him to wear very funny and compared himself to a clown when he had to put on strange shoes. But quite comfortable and seemed made of fabric or a kind of strange leather with a wider beak and sole, with springs that cushioned the steps upon contact with the gas. Floor. A description that immediately makes us think of today's spring sneakers. Wherever he went, he asked many questions and received many technical explanations about the wonders of that marvelous black world. Knew, but as he didn't always understand, he admitted in the book that sometimes he didn't pay much attention either. But with the interpreter's help, he found out, for instance, that the Acadians had devices capable of taking a photo of the head of a foot. Employment on planet Earth hundreds of kilometers away. In Jatsi, he also followed radio and television broadcasts to Earthlings, and that's how they learned some of our languages. Turns out, humanity's first artificial satellite was the Mirror, Sputnik, which had been launched by the Soviets a few months earlier in 1957. So it was big news at that time. The Brazilian was still amazed to see a couple, husband and wife, talking through the television, and was even more surprised when he was told that the device was actually a phone, and what he saw, it was a video call. He would also be introduced to other types of transport, such as a magnetic levitation train, and to large machines and various structures. Use a siu-siu, potpaki-obi, and technologies I couldn't quite understand, plus solar weapons that emitted lethal rays and even a kind of vision neutralizing device. When it was connected around a flawless ship to stop the day she and the crew were seen. At this point, Artur Berlet was told that his abduction was a city. According to the Akartians' rules, they should never interact with Earthlings. They should be seen and not threaten anyone on Earth. They said they made many trips to our planet.
And in that moment,
item they found the man is
we keep collecting the
seeds. They had already been trying to grow carte unsuccessfully up to that point. And they also mentioned that on their planet there was even a kind of wheat grain, but that it had a very... So, as they were spotted by Artur Berlet, whom the ship's commander mistook for as a farmer, he thought he understood planting, so they ended up taking the tractor driver to serve as a kind of office. Indeed, Berlet noticed that the food from Acarte wasn't tasty, he only liked it. A bit of beef that, by the way, he saw up close, and thought the animals were enormous. Also noticed that the days were much longer than on Earth, and if the weather maybe didn't favor the cultivation of our wheat, over there. Besides, Carte was super populous. There was hardly any space left to accommodate the 20 billion inhabitants, and resources could soon become scarce. The Akartians did not hide from Berlet a certain interest in occupying our land, but not to invade. Their intention, as sinister as it may sound, was to wait for humanity to annihilate itself in wars. They would revert it. Then the effects of nuclear radiation and they would take over the planet. When allowed to return home, the Earthling went back, conducted on the same ship he came in and was kept asleep most of the time. Time to avoid the effects of high speeds and zones of magnetic turbulence as explained by the designers. And in the 36 hours of journey, there was even a stop at an orbital space station near the jail. Finally, as they approached Earth and the Moon, Berlet could see our planet from space and described it like this. The Earth indeed was a spectacle on its own. I saw it as if it were a meter in size. But again, only a small part was clear, almost on the opposite side, where the Moon was. I did notice indeed that in South America at that time it was night. For in the bright part, I saw a part of a sea and a mix of continents or islands that I cannot see. I managed to figure out what they were. It emitted 5 colors. The first, I'm sure, was blue. It emitted from the bright part during the day. The second, the dark part, a mix of black with blue. The third was a kind of belt around the Earth, both on the dark and light sides, with its color resembling the sky. With blue too, Berlet concluded this description speaking of lights that formed a kind of rainbow at the poles. But it happens that only 3 years later, the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin would be the first man to travel through space on April 12, 1961. One aboard the Vostok 1, in a flight of 1 hour and 46 minutes. Minutes during which he orbited the planet when the admired one would inform humanity through radio the famous phrase, "I see the Earth and it is my Earth." This message surely did not surprise anyone. Humble tractor driver from Rio Grande do Sul, and before returning from his alleged space adventure, Space would have been advised by Giacartians to write a book telling everything he saw, because even if nobody believed him at that time, in the future, they said a few decades later, people began to, it wouldn't make sense. Berlet returned home after being missing for 8 days, very shaken, locked himself in a room and began writing and drawing non-stop in a notebook, everything he remembered. At first, he even tried to hide